Good day, everyone. I am Rayeti Montero, and I am from Group 6, and we are going to tackle about the Chapter 6, Learners with Additional Needs. So, Group 6 were composed of 5 members, me, Mr. Pontihon, Ms. Sampurado, Mr. Dominguez, and Mr. Caleste. So, Chapter 6, Learners with Additional Needs, were composed of 6 parts, which are the following: learners who are talented and gifted, learners with difficulty seeing, learners with difficulty hearing, learners with difficulty communicating, and then learners with difficulty moving or walking, learners with difficulty remembering and focusing. And I am assigned to discuss the part 1 and part 2. So let's start with part 1, learners who are talented and gifted. But first, let's define what is learners who are gifted and talented. So Learners who are gifted and talented are those students with higher abilities than average and are often referred to as gifted students. So they are those students na matatawag nating kakaiba sa atin. So their IQ is beyond normal. And then they refers to students whose talents, abilities, and potentials are developmentally advanced. So, yun yung sinasabi ko, advanced sila than those who katong mga kaidaran lang nila. The third one, they required special provisions to meet their educational needs, thus presenting a unique challenge to teachers. So, teaching those who are gifted and talented learners will be a big challenge to those teachers or educators whose IQ is normal lang. So, dapat those teachers and educators na makahandle ani nila is dapat jud na makigsabayan jud sila sa IQ sa ilahang estudyante. So, these learners or those learners who are gifted and talented often finish tasks ahead and might ask for more creative tasks or exercises. So, they are those students na wala pa gali due date, magpasa na. So, they are very committed to their class works and tasks. So, lastly, this group includes students with exceptional abilities from all socio-economic, ethnic, and cultural populations. So let's move forward with the differences between gifted students and talented students. So, the term giftedness refers to students with extraordinary abilities in various academic areas. However, talent focuses on students with extraordinary abilities in a specific area. So, that's it. So, and then there are also another way to look into giftedness, which is conceptualized by Gardner in 1993. According to him, intelligence is multifaceted. So, as you can see in the picture, there is a circle which was divided into 8 parts. So this is Gardner's 1993 multiple intelligences chart. So it is, as what I have said, it is divided into 8 parts, which compose musical, kinesthetic, interpersonal, linguistic, mathematical, naturalistic, intrapersonal, visual. When I say musical, they're those students who are music smart. When we say kinesthetic, they are body smart. Interpersonal, they are people smart. Linguistic, they are word smart. Mathematical, they are logic smart. Naturalistic, they are nature smart. Intrapersonal, they are self smart. And visual, they are picture smart. So, let's move forward with the identification. To be able for us to identify talented and gifted students, we must do the following. First, locate the student's giftedness. Second, describe the student's level of giftedness. And the third one is describe the student's field of talents. So let's move forward with the part 3, which is the learning characteristics. So when we say learning characteristics, what is it? So learning characteristic refers to the attributes or attitude of learners toward the learning process. So not all learners will exhibit the following characteristics. So, however, these are the manifestation of the gifted and talented student. One might possess a combination of characteristics in varying degrees and amounts. So without further ado, let me introduce to you the general learning characteristics of gifted and talented students. So first, high level of intellectual curiosity. So there are those students who have a lot of questions to their teachers. So there are those students na napakadami nilang what if, napakadami lang tanong sa kanilang guro, to the point na yung guro na mismo yung ma-stress ka kasagot sa mga tanong nila. They are what we call curious people. So second one is reads actively. So they tend to have an extensive vocabularies. They read quietly. Then sila yung tinatawag, they're just students na tinatawag nating mga bookworm and book genius. Marami silang alam when it comes to books. And they have advanced vocabularies. That's why they love reading English books na yung mga masasabi nating ang mga vocabulary is napaka matalinhaga, laglum. So third one is high degree of task commitment. So they are those students who often pass on time or advance sila magpass or magpass sila ahead of time. Then they finish their works with high level of accuracy, to the point na pinapass nila ang ilahang activities ni swak sa ilahang taste. Then gina-make sure nila na almost perfect jud to or ang uban pa perfect jud ang ilahang pagkapas. So the fourth one is they have keen power of observation. So when we say they have keen power of observation, they are those students who are very observant. They can pinpoint a very tiny details na kahit yung mga kaidaran nila hindi kayang gawin. The fifth one is they are very highly verbal. So they are very advanced in terms of communicating. Then they are so good using words and vocabularies. That's why mostly sa mga teachers is ginagawa silang ginapa-speech sila in front of many people kasi kaya nila. They are very high, they have very advanced terms of communicating. So the sixth one is they got bored easily. So why? It is because they are more advanced than their classmates. They learn rapidly, kaya yung iba na activities na binibigay ng teacher is parang normal lang sa kanila at nasasagutan nila ng madali. That's why naboboard sila. Kaya you as a teacher is a very big challenge kasi kailangan mong magbigay ng mga activities na bago sa kanila. So 7, they can retain and recall information. So they have a high memory retention than others. Masasabi natin lisod kay ini sila tudluan kay ikaw teacher magtudlo ka karon lahi imong explanation and then the other day nagdiscuss ka with the same topic and then lahi na pud imuhang example or imuhang discussion is ma-pinpoint jud na nila so makakuan teacher lahi lagi to so naa jud na sila so they're the students so nadugay kaayo makalimot they have high memory retention. So, number 8, they are those students exciting about learning new concepts. So, they are those students na hindi sila nagsasawang matuto as long as na yung mga matutunan nila that day or that certain day is bago sa kanila. So, they are yun nga, yun nga yung sinasabi ko na siya sa teacher, challenge siya sa teacher na magbigay ng unique activities na bago sa mga talented and gifted students. So, number 9, they are independent in learning. So, they tend to learn independently. Kaya nilang mag-self-study, kaya nilang turuan yung mga sarili nila. Karon ang mga talented and gifted students amidst this pandemic na nagmodular so advantage to para sa kanila kasi kaya na nila. Then number 10 is good comprehension and complex context. So they have advanced cognitive and affective capacity that good in conceptualizing. So when we say complex context, ito yung mga context na mga matatalinhaga o yung mga laglum nga English kaya nilang mabigyan ng simple words. So they're very good in comprehension. So number 11, they have strong, well-developed imagination. So they're the students who have vivid imagination. They are way more creative than their age level. That's why makapansin mo, they're those students na, or they're those mga gagmay kaayong bata pero nakapag-experiment na. Nakapag-experiment na or nakapag-create na ng mga invention. Why? It is because they have strong and well-developed imagination na yung lang itong na-imagine nila and then ilang gi-create and then boom, mauna. Number 12 is looks for new ways to do things. So, they're those students na dili mahimuyo ug way makutunan ana na adlaw. So, when a teacher is wala nagklase when a teacher is wala nagklase, then ang uban is malipay jud, yes, way klase si ma'am. But then, these students who are talented and gifted, mangita jud na sila og pamaagi nga makatunan. So they read books, they unsa ba na moadto sa library, mag-experiment ba sila or unsa ba nang ilahang kaya nga buhaton as long as ma-occupy tong time na wala ang maestra. So lastly, they often gives uncommon responses to common question. Obviously, they're the students na kakaiba talaga yun nga yung sinasabi ko, the way they think abstractly, logically, complex and insightful. Dili na ta magtingala nga kung kanang pinaka-common nga pangutana or atong ipangutana sa ilaha then ilahang kay oh my god, lagi to taas lagi kay tumurag na libog na inoon ka because given the way they think, how actually advanced they are. So, magkuan na jud na kakaiba jud na ila ang responses sa imuhang very common nga pangutana. So, let's move forward lastly to the general education adaptation. So, as we all know, learners who are gifted and talented usually get bored since they have mastered the concepts taught in classes. One thing that is common among gifted students is that they are very inquisitive. So fulfilling their instructional needs may be a challenging task, especially for those teachers. So that's why these are some suggested strategies for teaching a gifted student. So number 1, teachers may give enrichment exercises that will allow the learners to study the same topic at a more advanced level. Kasi nga advanced na yung pag-iisip nila, kaya yung topic nila is dapat advanced din kaysa iba. So number 2, acceleration can let students who are gifted and talented can move at their own pace, thus resulting in times in completing 2 grades level in 1 school year. So when we say acceleration is grade 1 pa ka madiretso na ka o grade 3. Especially na masasabi natin na when sila ang magbuot sa ilahang educational pace kung unsa ila ang sundon. So 2 grades level in 1 school year. Maglargo sila. So, number 3, open-ended activities with no right or wrong answer can be provided, emphasizing on divergent thinking wherein there are more possibilities than predetermined answers. So number 4, so leadership roles can be given to gifted students since studies have shown that gifted students are often socially immature. Kasi nga, bakit natin matatawag sila na they are often socially immature? Kasi nga, they study alone. They prefer to be alone. Kaya nga, wala masyado silang nakakahalubilo, wala sila masyadong kaibigan. Kasi nga, mostly kasi, when we say na they are very mga genius, so ang ilahang mga friends, circle of friends is just mga genius jud. Ikaw bugo ka then makigkauban ka sa mga genius, so feeling nimo, oh my god, dili man ko makaget sa ani niya unsa igi pang istorya. There's a big difference in that. So number 5, extensive reading on subjects of their own interest may be coordinated with the school librarian to further broaden their knowledge. Number 6, long-term activities may be provided that will give the gifted students an opportunity to be engaged for an extended period of time. So that would be the end of part 1. Again, here I am, and I'm going to start my discussion with the part 2 titled What Learners with Difficulty Seeing. So for this part 2, it is composed of four parts, which is the definition, the identification, the learning characteristics, and the general education adaptation. So first, definition. So what are those learners with difficulty seeing? Are those students with issues regarding sight that interfere with academics? They are those students who na may blurry yung pananaw nila. Then, according to Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or what we have called IDEA, they states that an impairment in vision that even the correction adverse affect a child's educational performance, which includes both partial sight and blindness. So, according to IDEA, those students who have visual impairment is naadyo epekto sa educational performance para sa mga students who have this impairment. So, how will be able to identify these students? So, they are those students who have physical signs such as crossed eyes, squinting, and eyes that turns outwards. So, the first identification na masasabi natin na these students or this certain learner have difficulty visually is yun nga, yung makikita natin sa mata nila, they are this, masasabi itong squinting, yung dili mahimuyo ang ilaang mata, and then cross eyes is yung murag matawag natin libat, ana, and then eyes that turns outward, yung permitting ana-ana on. That is the first identification. So they like to sit near, they are the students who like to sit near the instructional materials, or at times would stand up and go near to the visual aid. So there are those students, way back in high school, I have classmates na ano siya, visually impaired. Siguro blurry, ano siya is blurry iya ang pananaw kung naa siya sa layo. That's why even dako kayo siyang tao na adjud siya sa atubangan, and we can't do anything about that. So the third identification is learners with difficulty seeing may also show poor eye-hand coordination. When we say poor eye-hand coordination is makikita natin yan sa kanilang writing, as well as they show poor performance in sporting activities. So, for example, there's a plain of bond paper, white bond paper, and wala na siya linya, ana, diba? So, these students who have difficulty seeing, ug magsulat na sila from this area, paingon na siya sa paimbabaw, and then this area na po siya sa paingon sa ubos. So that is the first identification, is makita dyan nato sila sa ila ang agi. And then second is example with this poor eye-hand coordination is that kung padulaon nato na sila og table tennis, especially sa sports, sa badminton, sa table tennis, na gamay kaayo ang bula. And then kung magrally na magkapaspas na, kasi nga they have difficulty seeing, so mapildi dyan na sila, kaya wa sila kaayo kakuan, blurry ila ang pananaw. So the another indication is poor academic performance, as these students might have difficulty reading as well as writing. So yun nga yung sinasabi ko, for example yung kaklase ko noon, na kung nasa likuran siya, then papabasahin siya is muana dito mo, excuse ma, muduol siya sa muduol siya sa visual aid para lang jud maklaro og tarong. And it takes time. So let's move forward with the learning characteristics. So as we all know, good visual ability is critical in learning. Why? Most school lessons are done through blackboard writing, presentation, or handouts, or even in visual aids in most major subjects. So that's why visual impairment, whether mild, moderate, or severe, affect the student's ability to participate in normal classroom activities. Ito yung sinasabi ko na those students who have blurry, yung mga blurry ilang vision, is mahirap sa kanila, makaapekto talaga sa kanilang pag-aaral ang ganong impairments nila. And yung pag magbabasa sila, kailangan pa nilang tumayo at pumunta sa visual aid para lang makapagbasa o makaparticipate sa classroom activities. So in the past, students who are visually impaired are placed in special institution. So in a SPED center, so special education center. But then mostly nowadays, 2022 naman, or we are in the 20th century, most are enrolled with other children who are not visually impaired. So nagkasagol na, as what I have said earlier. Kaya nga, yun nga yung sinabi ko, your experience namin way back in high school na may kaklase kami who are visually impaired, na kahit kami na yung mag-a-adjust para sa kanya. So learners with difficulty seeing have restricted ways to learn incidentally from their surroundings, since most of them learn through visual clues. So, those students, alam ba natin na those students who who have difficulty in seeing, or those who are visually impaired, is mas naka-learn sila or maka-acquired sila ng knowledge through their hearing. So because of this, the other senses used to acquire knowledge. So ito yung sinasabi ko na yung mas ginagamit nila is yung tainga nila sa pakikinig ng mga discussion, aside from focusing on the visual aids. So mas nagfo-focus na lang sila sa discussion ng kanilang teacher or the instructor. Due to the limited ability to explore the environment, low motivation to discover is present. So let's go to the last part, which is the general education adaptations. So the following strategies may be considered in teaching those students who have difficulty in seeing. So, if use of books is present in your lessons, students with difficulty seeing should be informed ahead of time so that they can be ordered in audio recorded format or in braille. So, kung gagamit ka ng libro sa iyong discussion as an educator, dapat yung mga students mo na those students who are visually impaired is dapat gawan mo din ng audio recorded format ng iyong discussion, so that na kahit dili na lang sila makafocus sa handouts or sa naa sa blackboard, but then they can focus or hear those audio format instead to acquire knowledge. So when we say braille, it is a form of written language for a blind people. So if you have a students who are talaga complete blindness na talaga, you can suggest using them braille. But then those students lang naman who are mild lang naman yung vision nila, yung visually impaired is mild lang, so they can have this audio recorded format. So second one is portion of textbooks and other printed materials may be recorded so that the visually impaired students can listen instead of focusing on the visual presentation, as what I have said earlier na instead of mag-focus sila unsa tungkuan na asa i-present dira sa imuhang visual aid, is makapag-focus na lang sila sa pagpaminaw sa imuhang recorded discussion. So all words written on the board should be read clearly, so that students with difficulty seeing should be seated near the board so that they can easily more close to the instructional materials used during discussion. So if kato galing nakasulat sa blackboard, as a teacher, din kabalo ka nga naakay students who are visually impaired, dapat imudyo na siyang basahon loud and clear, so that yun nga yung sinasabi ko kanina na they acquired knowledge through their hearing, not their eyes, kasi nga blurry yung paningin nila. And then ito yung sinasabi ko na those students who have difficulty in seeing must be seated in front. Kahit pa malaki yung katawan niya or nila, kahit matangkad sila, nasa harapan sila, is wala ka talagang magagawa kundi mag-adjust, kasi nga you are complete. Lastly, students with difficulty seeing might need more time to complete a task or homework. That's why teachers should monitor the students closely to know who needs the extra time in completing tasks. So ito yung sinasabi ko. As a teacher, you should give exemption to the students who have difficulty in seeing, na for example, ang ilahang deadline is, for those students who are normal, deadline tomorrow. So ang kuan katong mga students who have difficulty in seeing, so pwede na sila pagkaugmaan na sunod ugma. So due date karon, sunod ugma ilaha, kasi nga maglisod sila sa paggawa ng kanilang activity. So dapat mag-give tayo ng extra time and exemption to those students. So that would be all. Thank you for listening. God bless us all.
Good day everyone. I am Ronan Paul Y. Puntihon from BSED Filipino, and I am the one who is assigned to report the part 3 of chapter 6, which is learners with additional needs, and my topic is learners with difficulty in hearing. So let's start. So definition: hearing plays an important role in student development and daily performance. Hearing impairment occurs when there's a problem with or damage to one or more parts of the hearing mechanism. A student with a hearing impairment is part of a heterogeneous group. So when we say heterogeneous, it means nalahi. So whose one common characteristic is some degree of hearing loss. To effectively teach students with hearing impairment, teachers need to become familiar with hearing related concepts. So it is important as being a teacher, if your student has a hearing impairment, to have a familiar with hearing related concepts. So according to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or the IDEA, defines hearing impairment and deafness separately. So first, hearing impairment is defined as an impairment in hearing, whether permanent or fluctuating, that adversely affects a child's educational performance. So deafness is defined as a hearing impairment that is so severe that the child is impaired in processing linguistic information through hearing with or without amplification. So kung magtatanong kayo, ano ba tong amplification? So amplification, ito yung makikita natin sa picture, na para siyang headphone or headset. So itong gamit na amplification na to, kapag ang isang tao ay merong hearing impairment, ito yung ginagamit para mas maiintindihan niya or magiging mas klaro ang kanyang mga naririnig na salita o mga tunog sa kanyang paligid. So para mas maiintindihan natin ang ang kaibahan, kung ano nga ba ang kaibahan ng hearing impairment at deafness. So hearing impairment, ito yung tinatawag natin sa Bisaya na bungol-bungol. So kapag sinasabi nating bungol-bungol, di ba, hindi naman talaga siya totally na wala talagang naririnig na mga tunog. Meron din siyang naririnig na mga tunog, kaso nga lang hindi klaro sa kanyang pandinig. So kung meron mang magsasalita sa kanyang harapan, is meron talaga siyang naririnig, ngunit hindi niya klaro or hindi niya naiintindihan kung ano ba yun. Kapag sinasabi naman nating deafness, ang deafness ito talaga yung tinatawag natin sa Bisaya na bungol. So kapag sinasabi natin na bungol ang isang tao o ang isang estudyante o bata, ay wala talaga siyang naririnig na tunog o kahit anong uri ng tunog na naririnig natin sa paligid, ay wala talaga siyang naririnig sa kanyang paligid. So kaya sinasabi dito na sa deafness na hearing impairment that is so severe that the child is impaired in processing linguistic information. So impaired in processing linguistic information, hindi niya naiintindihan o hindi niya naririnig ang isang salita mula sa kanyang kapwa. So ang tanging nakikita lamang niya ay ang bibig na gumagalaw na nagsasalita sa kanyang harapan. So types of hearing loss. Hearing impairment can be classified into 4 categories, depending on the site of the problem in the ear. First, the conductive, sensorineural, mixed, and central auditory processing disorder. So first, let us tackle about the conductive hearing loss. A conductive hearing loss impairment results from a blockage or damage to the outer or middle ear structures. This problem interferes with the transmission of sound through the outer and middle ear to the inner ear, resulting in reduced loudness of sound or the quantity of sound. During these periods of reduced hearing, the student may miss out on learning, negatively affecting all aspects of development. By Pagliano 2005. In many cases, a conductive hearing impairment can be corrected with medication, hearing aids, or surgery. So, ito yung tinatawag natin kanina na amplification, like the hearing aids, na nagagamit siya pantulong ng isang taong may kapansanan sa pandinig upang meron siyang maririnig na mga salita o tunog, o para mas klaro yung mga tunog na naririnig niya sa kanyang paligid. So, klaro naman dito na ang conductive hearing loss can be corrected with medication, hearing aids, or surgery. So, it means it is treatable. So, next, sensorineural hearing loss. A sensorineural hearing loss results from damage to the inner ear or the auditory nerve. Thus, even with amplification to increase the sound level. A student with sensorineural hearing loss may perceive distorted speech sounds. So, hindi niya klaro yung mga salitang naririnig niya mula sa kanyang paligid, resulting in difficulty with understanding speech and interpreting various sounds or the quantity and quality of sounds. So, kapag ang isang bata o isang tao na may sensorineural hearing loss, hindi niya klaro o hindi niya nai-interpret yung mga salita na sinasalita ng isang tao sa kanya. So, some of its causes include genetic disorders, or which can interfere with proper development of inner ear structures, which injuries, complications during pregnancy or birth, infections or illnesses such as mumps, measles, or chickenpox, and medication side effects. By License 1996. This type of hearing impairment is usually permanent and irreversible. Sensorineural hearing impairments are frequently, I repeat, frequently not medically or surgically treatable. So, kapag ang isang tao ay merong sensorineural hearing loss, hindi na talaga ito kaya pang pagalingin, 'di ba? Frequently not medically or surgically treatable. So, next, mixed hearing loss. A mixed hearing loss refers to a combination of conductive and sensorineural hearing loss. So, I repeat, a mixed hearing loss refers to a combination of conductive and sensorineural hearing loss, indicating that there may be damage in the outer or the middle ear and the cochlea or the auditory nerve. Treatment depends on the severity of the conductive. So, example, hearing aid, medical or surgical intervention. And the sensorineural, like hearing aid, portions of the hearing impairment by Dogan 2003. And last is the central auditory processing disorder. This form of hearing impairment occurs when the auditory centers of the brain are affected by injury, disease, tumor, heredity, or inborn, birth trauma, head trauma, or unknown causes. So, although the outer, middle, and the inner parts of the ear deliver sound signals, these signals are unable to be processed and interpreted by the brain. Thus, even though the person's hearing may be normal, these are difficulties with understanding what is being said, resulting in learning problems. So, next is about the identifications of my topic. So, Niemann, Greenstein, and David 2004 describe the impact of hearing impairment, where a child can see people talking but not understand what is being said. This results in the child having difficulties understanding the world and in expressing personal needs, resulting in limited interactions and social isolation. So, kapag ang isang bata, estudyante, o isang tao na may ganitong kapansanan, nagkakaroon talaga siya ng nahihiya na siya sa mga taong nakapaligid sa kanya kasi nga takot siyang, like for example, mabuli siya, 'di ba? In expressing personal needs, 'di ba? Nahihiya siyang aminin or ipagsabi sa kanyang kapwa na meron siyang kapansana. So, kapag ang isang tao ay merong kapansana man talaga, nagre-resulta ito ng kanyang limited interactions or social isolation. So, nahihiya talaga siya na makipag-socialize sa kanyang kapwa. Thus, it is important to identify the hearing impairment as early as possible. Otherwise, the child will also miss out on important educational experiences by Pagliano 2005. So, it is important to identify the hearing impairment. Dahil kapag hindi mo na-identify ang iyong estudyante o nalaman or pinag-alaman mo na kung meron ba siyang hearing impairment, magkakaroon talaga ng problema. Lalong-lalo na yung educational experiences ng bata. So sometimes hearing impairment can go unidentified partly because it is not immediately visible. A hearing impairment could be so mild that it may have gone unnoticed for many years. By Smith, Holloway, Patton, and Dodie, 1998. On the other hand, a hearing impairment may develop over time. The student is often the last one to recognize or report loss in hearing unless it has deteriorated significantly. If the hearing impairment remains undetected, it can result in the student facing a substantial educational disadvantage. So malaki talaga ang epekto ng pagkakaroon ng hearing impairment sa isang tao o sa isang estudyante kasi naaapektuhan talaga ang kanyang pag-aaral. Kasi nandyan na ang yung hindi niya masyadong maiintindihan kung ano yung dinidiscuss ng isang guro. At lalong-lalo na mas nagkakaroon ng problema ang bata sa kanyang self-confidence. The adverse effect of the hearing impairment can create challenges of a personal, academic, and social nature for the student and interfere with reaching full potential. Teachers need to be aware of the indicators that signal the possibility that a student has an undiagnosed hearing loss. On medical note, if the hearing problem is undetected and untreated, it can cause permanent loss of hearing and the long-term consequences for the quality of life can be serious. So kapag hindi nalaman or hindi agad na bigyan ng pagpapahalaga ang ganitong kapansanan, magkakaroon talaga ng problema. Nandyan na ang permanent loss of hearing and long-term consequences for the quality of life. So like for example, consider the case of Sue, a 10-year-old girl who had undiagnosed conductive hearing impairment with a mild hearing loss in her left ear. She thought most of her friends mumbled a lot. So akala niya yung mga kaibigan niya nagsasalita ng marami. So Sue stated that she had to strain to listen to them and found it difficult following a conversation, especially in group situations. So she would often have to ask her friends to repeat themselves. So ito na yung sinasabi natin kanina na yung hearing impairment sa Bisaya tinatawag nating bungol-bungol. Kasi meron naman talaga siyang naririnig na tunog. Ngunit hindi klaro. Often Sue wouldn't realize that someone was calling her. Especially if they were in the other room. Or if it was a very noisy classroom. She would often ask for the volume of the TV or stereo to be turned up or would it sit closer to them to hear properly. Without adult awareness, hearing impairment continued unrecognized. Table 1 is a simple of yes or no checklist of the signs and symptoms that are indicative or whether a student in your class has a hearing impairment. So, as you can see in the picture, that is an example of yes or no checklist of the signs and symptoms that a student has a hearing impairment. If any of these behaviors are present, teachers should consider suggesting to the students' caregivers that they refer the student to a health professional for a formal hearing assessment by Fraser 1996 and Castor 1993. So, as shown in the picture, a possible sign of a hearing impairment. First, using a loud voice when speaking, asking for information to be treated frequently, not responding when addressed, yung kapag tinatawag mo, hindi kanya naririnig. So, seeming distracted and or confused, not startled by loud noises. Preferring to be by themselves, so like playing alone rather than with a group or withdrawing from social situations. Kasi ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na nawawalan sila ng self-confidence kasi nga meron silang kapansanan at takot silang pagtawanan sila, ibuli sila, or yun sa Bisaya na tinatawag nating kantsawan. Next is problem hearing environmental sounds like doorbell, telephone ringing, people calling, and or talking of the student from behind. So, the learning characteristics of my topic. So, hearing is one of the most important senses. It plays a vital part in the learning process. It is held that more than 80% of the education is reserved through hearing by Pagliano 1994. American Speech Language Hearing Association or ASHA stipulates that hearing impairment can affect children in the following ways. First, it causes delay in the development of receptive and expressive spoken language skills. It also usually causes delay in general language acquisition and receptive and expressive communication. However, in the minority of deaf children born to signing deaf families, language and communication skills usually develop at a normal rate. Number 2, the language deficit can cause learning problems that result in reduced academic achievement. So, kagaya kanina ng sinabi ko, kapag ang isang estudyante ay mayroong hearing impairment, malaki talaga ang epekto sa kanya pag-aaral. Kasi nga, minsan hindi niya klaro or hindi niya naiintindihan kung ano ba yung sinasalita ng guro or ano yung dinidiscuss niya. Diyan, maapektuhan ang kanyang academic achievement. So next, communication difficulties may often lead to social isolation and poor self-concept. And next, it may have an impact on vocational choices. So next, difficulty in accessing spoken language may appear to be an obvious result of hearing impairment. On the contrary, there are many variables which affect just how much access a hearing impaired person has to spoken language. As noted earlier, there are different levels of hearing loss. Yet, even with these levels, many layers exist. For example, two different people may have the same type of hearing loss, the same level of hearing loss, and all practical, psychological processes could be almost identical, but they may not have the same access to spoken language. Person A may have acquired the hearing loss post-lingually, which has provided the opportunity to hear and the hearing nerves to be used. Person B may have had to learn to listen without ever experiencing sound, and would have had to learn that sound itself has meaning before beginning to interpret what those sounds mean. Clear access to speech is contingent upon many variables, including background noise being at a minimum, well-functioning and optimal hearing technology, clear speech being expressed by the speaker. So, general education adaptations of my topic. Hearing impairment can be a major obstacle for the students as it hinders their academic development and easy learning capability. With the teacher having proficiency in sign languages, the classroom teaching of orally challenged students needs some modifications to ensure hassle-free learning by the students. So, kailangan po talaga na ang isang guro ay kapag meron siyang estudyante na may kapansanan sa pandinig, ay kailangan rin ng isang guro ay meron siyang knowledge about sign languages. So, discuss vividly about over the matter to know better teaching strategies which will benefit the teachers and parents of students with hearing impairment alike. Some points are mentioned below. Number 1, clear pronunciation. Apart from sign languages, the orally disabled students mostly rely on lip syncs to understand the word or phrase mentioned by a person. If the pronunciation is not proper, it will confuse the students, obstructing their communication with the teacher. So, it is important for a teacher that he or she has a clear pronunciation so that a student that has a disability about hearing loss, he can malalaman niya talaga at makaka-focus siya ng maayos sa discussion ng isang guro dahil naiintindihan niya at klarong-klaro yung mga sinasalita ng guro habang nagdi-discuss siya. So number 2, minimize background noises. So it is always advised to reduce any source of background noise in the classroom, especially if the students are using any hearing aids or what we call amplifications. Hearing aids do not filter any distinct sound, rather they just amplify any available noise on the place. So using hearing aid along with loud background noise will not help the hearing impaired students. So, being a teacher, kailangan din nating makiramdam sa paligid natin. Kasi meron tayong mga estudyante na may kapansanan sa pandinig. So kasi, yung mga estudyante na may kapansanan sa loob ng classroom, lalong-lalo na kapag meron sila mga hearing aids or mga amplifications na ginagamit. So sinasabi dito, hearing aids do not filter any distinctive sound. So, for me, as a teacher, kailangan rin nating makiramdam. So, kapag meron tayong estudyante na merong kapansanan sa pandinig, kailangan natin i-minimize yung background noises. Kumbaga, pwede nating isara yung mga bintana at focus lang sa pag-discuss kung ano yung lesson na tinuturo sa estudyante. So, number 3, include visual aids in teaching. So, visual aids is very important when you are a teacher having a student who has a disability in hearing. Visual aids are beneficial for every student, even the students without any hearing difficulty. By writing down the phrases or using pictures, videos, and slideshows not only will help the deaf students to maximum extent but will also make the session interesting for them. So, mahalaga talaga ang visual aids sa mga estudyante na mayroong kapansanan, lalong-lalo na sa pandinig. Kasi kung hindi man nila klaro yung mga sinasalita ng guro nila, maski papano, meron pa rin mga makakatulong sa kanila upang maintindihan ang isang lesson, kagaya ng mga visual aids na makikita nila at mababasa nila. So number 4, make minimum use of available technology. Technology is advancing quite fast and many teachers are adapting modern and innovative techniques to enhance their method of teaching. The classrooms designed specifically for hearing impaired students are being equipped with interactive whiteboards or IWBs and sound amplification system to impart knowledge more profoundly. And last, record the sessions. Apart from storing it for the referral of any student in the future, recording or taping a particular session can help many students across the world. It can be uploaded on the various websites intended for hearing impaired students, and maximum students will be benefited. And that's all. Thank you for listening to my report and keep safe always.